At 1:29 in the morning on July 8, 2025, the heart of a sleeping giant began to beat. Not once, but thousands of times. Over the next 7 weeks, Mount Rainier produced the largest earthquake swarm ever recorded at the volcano in the modern era. More than 1,350 tremors officially located, thousands more too small and too rapid to pin down. A geological machine gun firing directly beneath the summit. And with every tremor, the same terrifying question echoed from the labs in Seattle to the suburbs living in its shadow. Is it waking up? This wasn't a distant rumble. The quakes were shallow, clustered just a few miles beneath the ice. At its peak, the mountain was shaking 41 times an hour. A constant, frantic shudder inside one of the most dangerous volcanoes on the planet. The largest tremor was a magnitude 2.42, too small to feel, but the number of them was deafening. This channel exists to document events like this, breaking down complex threats that unfold in real time. But a high number of our most dedicated viewers watch these reports and simply forget to subscribe. If you find this information critical, take 1 second to hit the subscribe button. It's an emergency broadcast system for understanding our world, and your support ensures we can keep the signal strong. Let's begin. The scientific response was immediate, but the answer they found was not what anyone expected. It was not magma. It was not an impending eruption. It was something older, stranger, and in some ways, far more unsettling. Because the 2025 swarm was never about the eruption that might happen. It was a violent reminder of the catastrophe that could happen at any moment with no warning at all. Mount Rainier is not a simple mountain. It is a composite being, a creature of fire and ice, locked in a perpetual, slow-motion battle with itself. On the outside, it is an icon, a 14,410-foot monument of rock and snow that dominates the Washington skyline. But inside, it is rotting. For millennia, the volcano's own heat and gases have been working against it. A process called hydrothermal alteration. Think of it as a form of geological self-digestion, steam and acidic fluids, heated by a pocket of magma miles below the surface, rise through cracks in the stone. These fluids are corrosive. They relentlessly attack the mountain's internal structure, turning hard, solid volcanic rock into weak, slippery clay. Dr. Harold Tobin, the Washington State seismologist, has spent his career studying the bones of these mountains. He understands that what is happening inside Rainier is not theoretical. You can see the results on the surface. Vast sections of the upper mountain are stained yellow and red, the telltale colors of rock that has been cooked, chemically altered, and stripped of its integrity. It is weaker, more brittle. It is fundamentally unstable. Now, place more than a cubic mile of glacial ice on top of that rotten rock. Mount Rainier holds more frozen water than every other volcano in the Cascade Range combined. It is an ice cap of almost unfathomable weight and power. This is not static scenery. This ice is a weapon, waiting for a trigger. The weight itself puts immense stress on the weakened rock beneath, and the ice provides the one ingredient needed to turn a landslide into an utter catastrophe: water. This is what keeps geologists like Scott Beeson, who monitors the park's hazards for the National Park Service, awake at night. The true threat of Mount Rainier, not fire, but water. A lahar. The word is Indonesian. It is deceptively simple for what it describes. A lahar is not a mudslide. It is a volcanic mudflow, a churning slurry of rock, ash, ice, and water moving at the speed of a freight train. It has the consistency of wet concrete and the unstoppable momentum of a flash flood. It does not flow around obstacles. It removes them. It entombs everything in its path: trees, bridges, buildings, entire towns, in a thick gray casing that can set as hard as stone. And the valleys that radiate from Mount Rainier like the spokes of a wheel are perfectly carved channels designed by nature to deliver a lahar directly into the heart of the Puget Sound lowlands. The Puyallup River, the Nisqually, the Mowich. These are not just scenic waterways. They are loaded guns pointed at hundreds of thousands of people. The swarm of 2025 began, and the alerts lit up the screens at the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network. At the University of Washington, Dr. J. Renat Hartog's team watched as their algorithms struggled to keep up. The data was overwhelming. Earthquakes were popping off in a tight cluster, one after another, 2 to 6 kilometers beneath the ice. A box of firecrackers going off in a confined space. This is where the public's anxiety spiked. An earthquake swarm at a volcano means one thing to most people. Magma is on the move. Molten rock is punching its way toward the surface. The monster is stirring. And for a few tense weeks in July 2025, that was the unavoidable, terrifying possibility on the table. Every new tremor felt like a countdown. Now, a question for you. If you lived in one of those valleys and you saw the news about 1,000 earthquakes under the summit, what's the first thing you would do? Let us know in the comments. The answers tell a story of their own. But Mount Rainier has a dark history, a ghost that proves an eruption is not even required for its most devastating attack. To understand the real fear, you have to go back 5 centuries. Around the year 1500, a massive section of the volcano's west flank simply gave way. There was no eruption, no plume of ash, no fiery lava flows. There was just the fundamental force of gravity acting on a mountain that had been weakened from within. The rock was rotten, saturated with water, and it finally failed. The collapse was catastrophic. It unleashed what is now known as the electron mudflow, a lahar of almost unimaginable scale. 260 million cubic meters of rock, mud, and forest debris surged down the Puyallup River Valley. It traveled more than 60 miles from the volcano, reaching all the way to the waters of Puget Sound. It buried the landscape hundreds of feet deep in a deposit that is still visible today. The modern towns of Ording, Puyallup, and Sumner are built directly on top of this 500-year-old debris field. This is the geologic precedent. The worst-case scenario that is not a computer model. The electron mudflow is the proof, etched into the very land, that Mount Rainier can produce a world-ending catastrophe on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. With no volcanic eruption to announce its arrival, the mountain does not need to be angry to be deadly. It just needs to be itself. So when 1,350 earthquakes started rattling the exact same area, the question for scientists was not just is it going to erupt, but is this shaking going to be the trigger that causes a repeat of the electron mudflow? Is the vibration enough to break loose a slab of that hydrothermally altered clay-rich rock and send it careening down the mountain? The alert level officially remained at green, normal, but the anxiety in the surrounding communities was at red. They were not worried about a dusting of ash. They were worried about a wall of liquid earth erasing their towns from the map. The pressure on the scientists at the USGS Cascades Volcano Observatory was immense. They needed an answer, and they needed it to be unambiguous. Is there new magma involved? Yes or no? The seismic data was providing clues, but it could not provide definitive proof. The character of the quakes, small, brittle, and shallow, pointed toward hydrothermal activity. But in a system this complex, you do not rely on pointers. You get a direct measurement. You take the mountain's blood pressure. This led to one of the most dramatic moments of the entire event. On August 4th, 2025, a team of USGS gas geochemists boarded a helicopter. Their mission was anything but routine. Dr. Christoph Kern and Dr. Laura Clore, specialists in volcanic gases, were not going to fly over the summit. They were going to fly through its breath. The summit of Rainier is not a placid, snowy peak. It is pockmarked with fumaroles, steam vents that constantly hiss a mixture of water vapor and volcanic gases from the simmering heat far below. This plume of gas is like a blood test for the volcano. Its chemical composition holds the secrets to what's happening deep inside. It can tell you if you are dealing with a long-term, stable heating system, or if a fresh batch of magma has risen from the depths, releasing gases that signal an impending eruption. The USGS released a statement that framed it perfectly. Volcanic gas sampling can help reveal the cause of earthquakes, much like how blood tests help a doctor figure out what's causing a patient's symptoms. So, the helicopter descended into the thin, turbulent air at over 14,000 feet, its rotors battling the winds that whip across the summit. The crew flew directly through the acrid, sulfurous clouds belching from the craters, a specialized sensor suite mounted on the helicopter sniffing the air. They were looking for a specific culprit, elevated levels of sulfur dioxide, a key indicator that new gas-rich magma is close to the surface. Seconds of flight through the plume could provide weeks of data for analysis. The risk was real. The air is unpredictable, the gases are corrosive, and the margin for error at that altitude is zero. The results came back. They were definitive. The gas signature was consistent with the volcano's known hydrothermal system. There were no telltale signs of fresh magmatic intrusion. The mountain was not running a fever because of a new infection of magma. It was just its chronic, long-term condition flaring up. The box of squibs theory was correct. The swarm was caused by superheated water and steam, boiling groundwater, moving through the network of pre-existing cracks and faults. As pressure built in one pocket, it would trigger a small quake, which would then shift the stress and trigger another and another in a cascading chain reaction. It was the sound of the volcano's plumbing system getting a pressure shock. It was incredibly loud, geologically speaking, but it was not a prelude to an eruption. By August 25th, the USGS felt confident enough to issue a formal statement. The swarm was over. Seismic activity was back to its quiet background level of 9 to 10 small tremors a month. Does knowing it was just boiling water make the 1,350 quakes more or less frightening? Knowing the sheer power of that much water moving beneath the ice is a threat of its own. Let me know your thoughts down below. The crisis, it seemed, was over. The mountain had settled down. But the episode revealed another, more modern threat, the speed at which fear and misinformation can travel in the digital age. In mid-November 2025, months after the swarm had ended and the science had been settled, panic flared up again. British tabloids, led by the Daily Mail, began running hysterical headlines. Chaotic tremors were being detected at Mount Rainier. Eruption fears were stoked. Online forums buzzed with activity, sharing graphs of seismic data that appeared to show continuous, frantic vibration, a phenomenon known as volcanic tremor. For a moment, it looked like the scientists had missed something. Had the volcano just been playing possum? The Pacific Northwest Seismic Network was inundated with inquiries. Their phones rang off the hook. Their social media was flooded. The answer, when it came, was a perfect illustration of the bizarre reality of monitoring a complex natural system in the 21st century. The chaotic signal was not coming from deep within the Earth. It was coming from a radio antenna. Specifically, an old analog antenna at a monitoring station codenamed Star. Heavy rime ice had built up on the structure. And as the fierce winter winds blew across the mountain, the ice was vibrating against the antenna. This created radio interference, a buzzing static that was being picked up and misinterpreted by internet sleuths as a volcanic signal. It wasn't magma, it was wind. In a frozen poll, the PNSN had to issue a public debunking, patiently explaining that the terrifying signature of an imminent eruption was, in fact, just bad weather messing with old equipment. It's a strange, almost funny story, but it underscores a deeply serious point. The public is primed for disaster at Rainier. The anxiety is a coiled spring, ready to be sprung by the slightest rumor. In a real crisis, cutting through that noise with clear, factual information will be one of the most difficult challenges authorities face. Every time we create one of these deep dives, we aim to cut through that noise. If this breakdown of the science and the story behind it is valuable to you, consider sharing it with family or friends who live in the Northwest or are just fascinated by the power of our planet. And hitting the like button tells the algorithm that this clarity is worth spreading. Getting the real story out there matters. The 2025 swarm ended. The media panic over a frozen antenna subsided. Mount Rainier went back to its baseline state of quiet, simmering menace. But the events of that year forced a hard question into the open. What exactly are we measuring? What are we watching for? Our entire volcano monitoring system, our alert levels, normal, advisory, watch, warning, are primarily designed to detect and track the movement of magma. They are built to answer the question, is it going to erupt? Dr. Alex Yezi, a USGS research geophysicist who was central to the 2025 response, put the swarm in perspective. It is the most significant event since we have been having monitoring equipment at Mount Rainier, she said, before adding a crucial piece of context. We have to remember, Mount Rainier is really old. We've only been monitoring it for 40, maybe 50 years now. A 50-year dataset on a volcano that has been active for 500,000 years. It is a snapshot, a glimpse. The swarm of 2025 kept the alert level at green from start to finish. Because according to the metrics of the system, nothing was abnormally wrong. No magma was rising. No eruption was imminent. The system worked perfectly, but it may have been measuring the wrong danger. The greatest threat from Rainier is not eruptive. It is gravitational. It is the risk of a massive landslide, a spontaneous collapse of its hydrothermally weakened flanks, triggering a Lahar that could travel for dozens of miles and obliterate entire communities. An event for which there is no separate color-coded alert level. An event that could be triggered by a large regional earthquake, or by an intense rainfall event, or by nothing more than the mountain finally succumbing to its own internal decay. This is the great unsolved problem of Mount Rainier. And it is a problem being actively accelerated. Between 1896 and 2021, the volcano lost 42% of its glacial area. The Stevens Glacier vanished entirely. This is not just a cosmetic change. The glaciers act as a kind of icy glue, a massive weight pressing down, helping to hold the unstable, altered rock in place. As the ice melts, that buttressing effect is lost. The mountain effectively gets lighter and less stable at the same time. Climate change is not just warming the planet, it is actively destabilizing one of its most dangerous volcanoes, increasing the risk of a collapse that has nothing to do with an eruption. This is the quiet threat, the one that does not generate frantic seismic signals. The risk is not a sudden fever, but a slow, creeping disease. And it is happening in plain sight. In April of 2026, Mount Rainier National Park dropped its timed entry reservation system. The crowds returned, filling the roads and trails at Paradise and Sunrise, looking up at the majestic, beautiful, serene-looking peak. They are hiking and sightseeing on the slopes of a volcano that scientists from the IAC designated as one of 16 decade volcanoes. A global list of volcanoes worthy of intense study precisely because of their history of destruction and their proximity to dense populations. The 2025 swarm was the loudest noise the mountain has made in half a century. It was a failure of imagination to see it only as a question of eruption. It was a symptom. A stress test. A reminder from the planet that the ground beneath our feet is not as solid as we believe. I know we talked about this at the start, but if you have watched this far, you understand that these stories do not have simple endings. We continue to track them, monitoring the data and the expert consensus. Subscribing is the single best way to ensure you don't miss the next chapter in this unfolding story. It's important. We need you with us. Today, as of July 2026, Mount Rainier's seismic activity is back to its normal, quiet background rhythm. The mountain sleeps. But the science of the last year has told us something profound. The period of quiet is not necessarily a period of safety. The forces of decay are always at work, turning rock to clay deep inside the edifice. The glaciers continue to retreat, removing the weight that helps hold it all together. And the memory of the electron mudflow lingers in the valleys below, a 500-year-old ghost that serves as a blueprint for a future disaster. The 1,350 earthquakes of 2025 were a fire alarm. The fire wasn't an eruption. The fire was the slow, inexorable rot from within. The question it leaves us with is not whether the volcano will erupt again. It will. The real question